Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by today. My guests today are Aaron and Sarah Hayes. We met Aaron and Sarah probably 13 years ago now when we moved to Reading, and they have since relocated to Tennessee. So I asked them if they'd come on today and talk with us about that move and just share with us some of the stories that they have about adapting to a new place. A lot of people are moving right now, and I did an interview. Actually, it wasn't an interview. It was just me talking about my experiences about moving. But it was watched by a lot of people, and a lot of people had comments on it. So I wanted to have them up on today, just as a follow up to that, and for them to be able to share some of their experiences with relocating to another state. So, welcome, Aaron and Sarah.
Hello.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi. So, let's start off by talking about where you went and how that decision was made.
Go for
Me? I
it.
thought you were going to talk. Well, we're in Cleveland, Tennessee, which is a small little town. It's about, I think, probably about 50,000. It's outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. So it's pretty close to the Georgia border. It's at the bottom of the Smoky Mountains. It's a neat little town. It reminded us a lot of, we visited quite a few different places when we were considering moving, but it reminded us of Reading in the 90s.
Okay.
So, it's a little bit smaller, but there's a lot of things that are being built, a lot of the infrastructure that's coming in, and it's got a neat history as a community. It's got a really beautiful older Pentecostal university. It's called Lee University. Billy Graham went to it before it was called Lee. And
Interesting.
so it's a very beautiful, like kind of university area that's downtown. And then it's got all the other stuff. And so, yeah, that's where we've landed. But how we came to the decision was a little bit different.
Yeah, so I don't know. Okay, you can hear from my perspective now, but we yeah, we had decided, I don't know, I'd been feeling like getting out of California for a while. I'd been kind of feeling like, man, it's not aligning with my values. It just feels, we were in a small conservative area, but didn't feel like our vote really made a difference or mattered anymore in the state, because it was always trumped by the larger populations down south that didn't feel like necessarily represented me, my little kind of urban area and a rural area. And so we Aaron ended up having a dream, kind of talking about it was time to leave California, and shared it with me, and I immediately just was like, yes, like we're supposed to go. I felt it in my spirit. Aaron kind of wrestled with that a little bit, and because I was born and raised in Reading. All my community, all my family, all my memories, was there. Had birthed my children there in the same hospital I was born in. Aaron
Yeah.
was pretty much born and raised there in that area too, and so we were established. We were living in what felt like our forever home, and we just it was a hard decision to say yes to, but it felt like the Lord was in it. We knew actually that the Lord was in it and was directing it. We had a small group of people that we were talking with about possibly moving to a different, moving out of the area with us. And so we took one of the families or one of the couples, they went with us, and we checked out a couple of different places because it was literally, we weren't moving for work. We weren't moving for, to somebody or to something. So we opened up a map and got to be able to basically just say, okay, where would we like to go? And we started looking at climates and, political status and safety and,
Taxes.
environment for, yes, taxes and environments for our kids. And, narrowed it down to a couple places and got on a plane and, flew to one, and then just immediately felt in my spirit like, no, this was not right. It just felt oppressive. Just even though the place was beautiful, it just did not resonate with me. And then we drove out east towards Cleveland, and the further east we drove, just the more peace I felt. It felt right. And especially when we were in Cleveland, we knew one family that lived here. So that helped kind of pave the way for us to also get, educated about which schools to send our kids to, and we're just get connected with different people and things. But so that's how we made our decision. We literally got in the car, opened up the map, looked and said, okay, let's try these places. And went somewhere and was like, okay, that's it. We just made a decision. And then, and it's wild, but the Lord confirmed that that was the right choice, because he opened up so many doors for us. We had, we weren't buying immediately. And so we had to find a place to rent. I didn't know if we were going to have to live in an RV for a while. And with our
Sarah's going to worst case
4
scenario.
children.
We're going to live in a tent in a van down by the river, which wasn't ever going to happen, but that's where she was going to in her
I
mind.
was like, all right, if that's what we have to do.
We're going to
But-
live in an RV with 20 people that work for the circus. That's where
Yeah.
Sarah went to in her head.
But thankfully, that's not what the Lord had in mind. He knew what
Obviously.
we needed to stay sane. And we had some friends say, oh, we know this. We had a common friend, and they had just bought a house here in Cleveland that was going to be available for rent the week that we moved here. And so it was things like that, where it was like, okay, the Lord's just opening the door for us, and it just felt right. And we had peace all around. So we immediately pulled the trigger, put our house up for sale, sold fast because of, the market was going at the moment. It was 2 years ago, this last
Mhm.
December,
Mhm.
that we moved here.
When everyone was trying to get out of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So for me, the decision to move probably felt different than it did for Sarah. If you know Sarah, Sarah's got to hear from the Lord. And if she feels like the Lord says yes, then she just will drop anything and everything and go do that. I maybe am a little bit more stubborn, but for me, we had transitioned out of pastoring for about 11 years. It was eight years full-time on staff, but before that we were very involved, and I was burned out, and I had gone through this season of burnout, kind of a midlife crisis time. We were living on our dream property. It's close to the river, and we had 7 acres, and I had put an insane amount of work into that property. Felt it was a very beautiful, sacred, healing place for us.
Yeah.
So for me, thinking about leaving was very, very difficult. There was a personal level too of I had stepped out of the nonprofit world because I went from pastoring into the nonprofit world. And then I went into coaching and consulting, which is what I do for a living. And part of my coaching and consulting was pulling me into the political world. And I didn't want to spend my 40s invested in politics. But I was very now hyper aware of what was happening on the political scene in a very personal way with people that I knew and loved and cared about that were giving their lives to this, and with the opportunity for me to step into it. But I didn't want to be in politics. And I just felt like it wasn't right for me. So there was that tension. And I don't think you move unless there's either something pulling you towards it or there's something pushing you out.
Pushing you away.
And I felt
Yeah.
like we had something pushing us and we had something pulling us. See, we've talked about moving a lot in our early marriage. We talked about living in Montana or, different
Mhm.
places that we thought about moving to, but there was really nothing pushing us. And the idea wasn't strong enough to pull us yet. So after going through this burnout season and then slowly rebuilding and then looking at California specifically, and I don't want to spend any more time on California, but I was looking at it and going, I've invested all of my adult life here as a teacher, as a pastor in nonprofits, building a school, coaching leaders. And do I want to spend my next couple of years getting wrapped up in politics? Because it's the only way I feel like I can stay here with a clear conscience is to try and change fundamentally decisions that are happening at a pretty big level. And I didn't want to do that. And then the Lord began to speak to me, gave me a dream, and I shared it with Sarah. And then Sarah was like, "The Lord has spoken, thus saith the Lord."
Well, and the Lord confirmed it to me too. And you know, I know the Lord communicates to all of us. Like he's always speaking to all of us and stuff, and just tuning into him. But it's important that he heard from the Lord, and I received it as, you know, that. But then I also had the Lord speak to me directly and had my own confirmation of like, no, this is the direction, what the Lord is saying, and you know, had that confirmation there. So
it helped that we were on the same page, even though we got there from different angles.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
really good point because yeah, in most of these big decisions, I think couples find themselves on on coming from different perspectives and
Yeah.
hopefully landing on the same page. But that can come with some real struggle.
Yeah.
I think part of the struggle is like Sarah's very spiritual. Not that I'm not spiritual, but like that's not my first. My first is logic.
Mhm.
My well, it's kind of logic. I should just erase that last statement. My first is not logic. But when it comes to a decision like that, I start thinking it takes me a long time to process, and so um moving is scary. Like I'll just tell you, like if you're thinking about moving, it's scary and that's part of the process.
Mhm.
And I actually think it's one of the best parts of the process because it brings all this stuff up in you. And I think the thing that it triggered the most for me is like I've lived my life as a pastor's kid. I've worked in different environments where maybe I needed some faith or courage to do what I needed to do, but it didn't feel like it was like I need I need God to speak to me. I need God to show up, or I'm embracing the unknown. I had never done anything on the scale that was like, I need faith to see this and to have the courage to do it. And that's kind of the experience that we had driving across the country and all the hurdles we had with that. But it was like the faith component is the part that it really activated in me, where I felt like we're really on a journey with
Yeah.
God more than we are
Yeah.
on a journey for my business or even a journey for my family.
Yeah.
Although that's really what it became, was a faith journey for all of us that bonded us. And that was the unexpected. It,
Oh,
it was the unexpected blessing of when you move across country, all you have is each other.
Yeah.
We moved here, we knew one family that it didn't really pan out for us to have a relationship with them, but they weren't really there, so it was just us, and that was a little bit amazing
Mhm.
because we were so anonymous when we moved here. I mean, nobody knew us. Like we could go to
yeah.
Costco and I wasn't talking to someone every 5 feet, which made
And
them happy.
introvert Sarah, I love
Because
that.
at Costco and Reading, it was like, this is going to take 3 hours if we take Aaron with us.
Yeah.
So, because I knew it, 40 years in a town, you're like, and
Sure,
I
sure.
want to be everyone's friend. So every
That's
person I see,
right.
I'm like, oh, let's give me a hug, give me a life
Yep.
update. And Sarah's like, just get me through the milk aisle so we can get out of here.
I was in a store the other day and I heard somebody calling out to me, but I didn't register at all. They kept calling my name over and over. And all of a sudden I realized like, oh my gosh, they're talking to me because
Oh, how
I've gotten so in the
interesting.
habit of just nobody knowing me that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, I was taken back, like, wait a minute, somebody knows me here.
Yeah.
And we do know people here. And that has been kind of a joy. I do want to jump back for a second. One of the things was, yes, Aaron and I needed to be on the same page about moving, but our kids also were a huge factor in that.
Yeah.
And
I
I
was
know,
gonna ask how they'd done with the adjustment.
yeah. So, when we first brought up the idea to them, I did not expect them to actually be as on board as they were, but every single one of them was on board. Our adopted heart adult son, he stayed in California but our four youngers, they came, they all moved with us, and everyone was ready and up for it and just believing the best. And it was just the grace of the Lord that everybody was on board and excited, and because we needed a lot of grace coming into it. Our kids, that has been the biggest impact, has been on them. And just, our daughter, I saw her really go through some shutdown phases when we first moved here. She's a little more introverted, a little more harder to get out and make friends. She wasn't in school either. She was finishing homeschooling through the charter school back in California. So she didn't have an environment to go to and meet new people, except for a little bit of some church atmospheres. And it was actually kind of hard for her to get in and to connect and find anybody there to connect with. But so we saw her kind of go through some shutting down, go through some phases of really withdrawing, really actually kind of going through, I actually feel like it was a necessary stage of fear in her life. And because she ended up having to get to this point where she was so trapped by just fear and insecurities. And I think it was all brought to the surface through this process of moving and feeling alone, feeling isolated, even though we had each other, her friends and the people that she felt safe with were all so far away. And so any place that she wanted to go, she wanted adventure, she wanted to drive, out to the lake or this and that, but she would be so paralyzed by fear and doing it by herself that it really stopped her and hindered her from doing anything. And just in this last year has had massive breakthrough. She ended up, the Lord prompted me to just push her out of her comfort zone. And I was like, you need to do something really big. And she ended up going to Ecuador this last summer with Aaron's parents who lived there, and she traveled all by herself, and it was kind of pushing her out of the nest a little bit, but it has just sparked this fearlessness in her. And it's been so huge to see her come back now to Cleveland and just who she is now, just living and going out, doing everything she wants to do, meeting all these new people, just being outgoing. But I feel like she never would have really embraced that if we had stayed in Reading, because she would have just stayed in her comfort places with her comfort zones, and instead she had to kind of get to this place to the end of herself where she was like so trapped and so isolated that she had to break through and really conquer these layers of fear that had always kind of been in there. But she had never been able to fully address before in such an extreme way.
I think probably all the kids had stuff like that. I mean,
yeah, our son Toby.
Yeah.
On some level, huh?
Yeah. Our son, it's interesting too, because when we were back in Reading, the last 4.5 years that we had homeschooled. And so they hadn't been in public school since they were little in an elementary school. And we moved here, and halfway through the school year, put them in public school. 2 of them one in high school, one in 8th grade and one in 5th grade, as when we started here. And that was a huge rude awakening, even though it is a more conservative area here in the South and the Bible Belt and all of that. They ended up having to grow up in some big ways.
Really fast. That's one thing I'll say is you have an idea in your mind. I'm going to move to Tennessee. It's more conservative. It's the Bible Belt. It's going to be, and when we got out here, when we visited, that's what it felt like. It's like, oh, the youth pastors are on the school campuses regularly, and they are. But there's it's cultural Christianity out here. Whereas in the West Coast, it feels like you're a Christian or you're not. And it's very clear. Out here, almost everyone calls themselves Christian, but it doesn't mean the same thing.
Okay.
And so like a lot of kids call themselves Christians, but they're also being really wild. They're doing the stuff that you'd expect high school kids to do, but they're doing it and then going to church, and there's no sense of there's no disconnect for them that maybe that's not what it means to be a Christian. So we had homeschooled the kids, and then they got out here, and I mean, it was a pretty big, like, whoa. And then they thought, well, we had all kinds of thoughts, but part of what they thought was Tennessee is bad. These kids are just bad. And the thing was is that they hadn't been in California public schools for a couple of years. And so they equated it with Tennessee instead of equating it with our culture. And see, that's something that I thought, oh, the culture is going to be different out here. But the truth is, America's pretty homogenized.
Yeah.
It's California is driving the culture of America in so many ways that I don't see, especially I worked with schools and teens and was on campuses. I don't see a big difference. And
Interesting.
so if you're shifting your move, maybe it's because of spiritual, religious, or more conservative direction that you're sending your family, you might find that in terms of policies and taxes, but I don't think you can count on that for your school system.
Yeah.
Your school system and leading your family, it has to come from you, because
Yeah.
I don't even think you can count on that from the church these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
that's one thing that has bonded us more is I feel like we're every year getting better at being together and figuring out how to worship and follow Jesus together. And we're really fighting for that now.
Yeah.
We're fighting for that. We shifted churches recently because of that, because our two oldest don't really want to go to church anymore. And it's like that was really painful. And at
Mhm.
the same time, we're still making adjustments to capture our kids' hearts while we can, and help them have a connection with the Lord that is important for us.
It's always got to start in the home. Like, anyway, I know this is a little off topic, but you cannot make that shift hoping that, oh, well, if I switch to this culture or this environment, that they're going to raise my kids right. Then everybody's still on their phones. Everybody still has access to the computers. Everybody is still being influenced by the world nonstop,
And
whether you're
but I don't
Christian or
think that's
not.
I
And
don't think that's off topic. I think
yeah,
that's one of the things we discovered. You
yeah,
have some Pollyanna ideas whenever you move anywhere.
yeah,
Like you have some ideas in your head for what you think it's going to mean, it's going to be safer, or it's going to be healthier or better, and it's
yeah,
like it's just trade-offs.
yeah,
In California, the politics are horrendous. Out here, no one's talking about politics, but all of the same issues with kids are happening here, and sometimes maybe even a little bit worse because no one thinks it's happening here. You
That's
know?
very insightful. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Wow. How has it been trying to find a faith community? I mean, you said you've changed recently. Have your kids found the change to be something they want to step into at this
Well,
point, or is that still kind of in the process of happening?
I think maybe our circumstance is a little bit unique because we had been in ministry and I had burned out, and we had taken a couple years and we're just doing house church with some friends. So it was very intimate. Um, and we were doing dinner every week, and then we'd get in the word together, and our families all those were some of the families that were going to move with us. And it wasn't, you have to almost, for us, it was like, you got to be called to move. Like the Lord has to speak. So they didn't have that for them. They felt like they needed to stay. So when we came out here, it was nice, at least for me, for a little while, because it was a reset. Part of the hard thing for me is having, pastored in a church and having been semi well known in that community for being a pastor. Every church I set foot in that town, it was like awkward. It was like awkward times 10. It's just like, oh, what are you doing here? And um, and so it felt very difficult. And also because I'm not going to speak for Sarah, but I personally was in pain, and so coming out here and having that sense of anonymity, we could just go to church and just go to church. And that was nice for a little while. It was really nice to be in worship. We got in church. I think I cried every Sunday for the first 6 or 8 weeks just in worship because
Mm,
I missed it so much, and I missed, even though we had house church, we weren't able the corporate singing part, um, and but I also learned, like, well, now I have X-ray vision because I've been in the ministry long enough. I walk in, it takes me 5 minutes, and I can see through all the walls, and I know what's happening with leaders because you once you've seen it enough times, you can just sense it, so
yeah, yeah.
it was a powerful restart. And but then part of it was that, we've kind of been on this journey to find a place that our kids can connect. We went to a very big church for a little while, but it was kind of like, some things were really good, some things felt like Jesus on ice. And so, I had a hard time with that. I have
Yeah.
a hard time with high production church at this point. I want something more intimate, something that has the love of the scripture, like the Baptists, that has the passion to see the Holy Spirit show up like the Pentecostals, and that has the come as you are mindset of a non-denominational church. And that's kind of hard to find.
It
So we
is.
went to
It
we went
is.
to a we went to a big church that had amazing worship, and that had a really good pastor. It was a really good speaker, but it was the Jesus on Ice church, and I just was like, I don't know if I can do it. And then we went to a small church, and there was a lot of connection, but there was no vision,
Mhm.
and that was really painful. And so now we're kind of in between, and we're looking again. And I would say that's the challenging part. Is it's, in this town in particular, we're in the buckle of the Bible Belt. That's what they call Tennessee.
Wow.
There's, 40, I think 40,000 people, and there's like over 300 churches. There's like, if you spit,
Wow.
you'll hit a church.
Yeah, there's a
Like,
church on every corner and sometimes three.
yeah, sometimes it's like church, 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 so it was quite difficult. It is quite difficult, to be in church hunting mode, um, and painful. I,
Mhm.
I personally find it painful. Sarah doesn't. She loves, like, it's like Baskin Robbins to Sarah. She loves seeing all the flavors in which God shows up.
Yeah.
I show up in church, and I'm looking for, is there some way I could serve or add value here?
Mm,
That's how I think.
okay.
Sarah's thinking,
Two very different experiences.
yeah, and Sarah's looking for, like, how is the Holy Spirit? I think Sarah's way is probably better. I'm thinking about me, and she's thinking about the Holy Spirit. So, I
Mm.
feel convicted on Sundays a little bit because Sarah's like, how's the Lord moving? And I'm like, I wouldn't follow that pastor. Like, I couldn't ever lead under him. So I don't want to stay here. And so, like, which makes it really hard because Sarah will be like, man, did you feel the Holy Spirit? And I'm like, did you sense the ego on that guy? And so, and the other part is, this is institutionalized church. So, like, they love their choirs. I mean, their choirs are off the hook. They're huge. But it's like a
Wow.
throwback to, like, we went into a Pentecostal church on this last Sunday. We didn't know it was Pentecostal.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and their choir off the hook, but it was pretty much a throwback back to the 90s. And I was like, I felt like I got in a weird time machine. I just was like, what's happening right now? And that was unsettling to me. Sarah
Uh-huh.
thought it was fun because there's these old Pentecostal ladies who are worshiping,
They
and
just love the Lord and there was so much joy and stuff. So I didn't,
Uh,
yeah. But I did have the understanding when I was there of like, I don't think my kids are going to resonate with this music. I don't think that this is going to, there's a lot of kids wearing suits here on Sundays. My kids were wearing hats to church, and they were the only ones there wearing a hat in church and stuff, and big no. But it
or
was
coming from the stirring, wearing hats, no big deal.
yeah,
and
yeah.
But so it was with this realization of like, okay, I'm just going to enjoy seeing this different expression of the Lord here today and be thankful that we get to see it. But I also know that this probably isn't going to be where we stick. And so for us right now, church is not about us. It is trying to find a place where our
Yeah.
kids know people, where our kids can feel connected. And that is our drive right now, where all of us can feel kind of safe, but especially our children, where they feel like, okay, I'm excited to go to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time too, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, because we are in between churches, because we're not relying on the church to be the main source of feeding our children. Is we get back to that place of like, okay, we need to have time at home together as a family. We need to be in the word together.
We have had the best I can't speak for Sarah. I can speak for me. I've had the best conversations that I've ever had with my kids since moving here.
Yeah.
About God, about church, about life, about culture, about
Yeah.
politics, about sex, about
Mhm.
drugs, about violence. I mean, when you're an outsider, all of those things that when you're the insider, you don't think about because you're already in. When you're
Mhm.
the outsider, all of those things come to the forefront, and your values or your lack of them come to the forefront. We got in the high school with Toby, and, in one of the cases, the football players were picking on like a Down syndrome kid, and Toby started standing up for the kid and eating lunch with the kid to protect the kid. And then he paid a social price for that,
Mm,
and the
yeah.
kids, there was like, is Toby going to get jumped? And so here we are driving in the car, and I was so filled with pride to see my son standing up for someone who couldn't defend themselves, while at the same time giving my son permission to defend himself if these boys came after him.
Yeah.
If you get circled, Toby, I give you permission. Don't wait for them to throw the first punch. If it's 3-on-1, punch him in the throat, and get out of there as quick as you can. We were having these weird father-son conversations.
And telling his brother, and if you see him in that situation, you join in and you help your brother.
Right.
There you
Stuff
go.
that you don't, but like in Reading, that would have never happened
Yeah.
because we were the insiders. But when you're the outsider, all of a sudden these
Yeah.
different parts of your reality that you don't think about come to the forefront.
Yeah.
And you could see it as a curse, or you could see it as a blessing. I
Yeah.
saw it as a blessing because they
We saw
they
so much fruit from it
so
in our
much,
family.
so much. And it was scary, and it was painful. And all of us have felt lonely at different times. I think
Yeah.
all of us have wanted to go back to Reading and go
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And but I'm realizing, like, now that we've been gone long enough, home isn't a location. Home is a people for me.
Yeah.
Home is Sarah, it's the kids. Now, there are certain people from Reading that when I'm with them, I feel like I'm at home.
Mhm.
When we're with the Roadrunners, our family friends, I feel like I'm at home. When I'm with our neighbor Kelly, or when I'm with our good friend Melanie and Ken,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm at home.
Yeah.
But they could come out here and I would feel a sense of home, or I could go there and I would feel a sense of home. Home is less about the destination, and it's more about the people that you're doing life with. And that's something that I've
Yeah.
learned in this transition.
There's one thing that the first year was definitely the hardest. Being out here, my friend had told me that moving is kind of like fasting. When you fast, kind of all the yuck comes to the surface. All the gritty stuff comes to the surface. The worst things about you sometimes come to the surface that you feel, and you have to confront it. Your fear of loneliness, your fear of not being known. And there was a point where the one family we knew here, there was a incident with them, and we got felt really misunderstood. And we had this realization of like, we are strangers in a strange land. And
Yeah.
it was this heavy settling on us of, we are strangers in a strange land. Nobody knows here. We're not understood here. And, and so that was just really interesting. There was a lot of pain in that. but there was a lot of perseverance too, and we were tougher and we have more faith and we're stronger for our children are stronger for it. And it has been so rewarding. And I would make this decision every time if I had to, even though we miss so many of our friends and our family and our home back
We
there
miss our home.
and stuff. But we are just, we would do it again and
I
again
would-
because of the fruit of it.
I would do it, yeah, just because of the fruit and I've never, I don't know how we could have manufactured an adventure
Yeah.
that bonded us and like we're close, I would give up all the house, all the money, like I would give up all of that if I knew that I'd have connection with my kids.
Wow.
And that's what we have that I didn't know we were going to get as a byproduct of making a
Yeah.
massive change.
Yeah,
Mhm.
good.
Wow. It certainly brought out a lot, didn't it?
Yeah.
It did.
Oh yeah.
Did.
I will say this practically,
Mhm.
don't buy a trailer and move yourself if you're coming out here. And I'm not going to tell the story why. We would have to do a part 2. It's just embarrassing. But by the time we packed everything up, overloaded the trailer by thousands of pounds, moved across country, blew out all of the tires and had to replace all the tires,
Mm.
and had to get new tires on my truck, and had to get out here and then have the axle break an hour before we got here, and then have to get a U-Haul to get our stuff to get it to the last 2 hours of the trip,
Yeah.
and then try and sell it for a $4,000 loss. I just want you to know you should just hire a
Hire a
moving
mover.
company and take your time
Yes.
enjoying your time with your family across country.
Yes.
There you go. Practical advice.
Very practical. That's great. Thanks, you guys, so much. This was so good. Just such a realistic look at what it's like to move to another area.
Yeah.
Because it is tempting when you feel that push to feel like, oh, there's just this oasis of pleasure out there,
Yeah,
that
it's
we
not.
can all go
Yeah.
to.
The grass is greenest where you water it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being with me today.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Cheryl.
Thanks for having us.